All right, everyone, on to Chapter 2 of Breath by James Nestor, and this chapter is called Mouth Breathing, and it essentially chronicles how terrible it is for human health and well-being and actually aesthetics to be a mouth breather. And that last point is what I want to emphasize in this video. See, about half of the people that I talk to in private one-on-one chats, available through my website, are interested primarily in changing the way they look. Okay, and the idea of improving their breathing by doing something like MSE is almost an afterthought. What I often tell people is that you don't realize how bad your breathing troubles are actually affecting your aesthetics. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and it happens all the time, who wanted to do orthodontic work and possibly an MSE in an attempt to change the way he looked, in an attempt to augment his facial aesthetic. And I asked him, do you have any breathing problems? As a kind of segue into, okay, well, if you do have breathing problems, then you definitely want to consider an MSE because it might improve your aesthetics, but it'll definitely improve your breathing. That's a guarantee. It's an impossibility that it won't improve your breathing due to the mere fact that it's going to expand your nasal volume and thus improve your nasal airway directly, as well as your oral airway, giving you more tongue space, allowing your tongue to come up and forward out of your throat. He said, no, not that I know of. I think my breathing is pretty much fine. But throughout the chat, while he was sort of reading over his list of questions and I was observing him, I noticed that whenever he was absorbed into his paper and not paying really close attention, his mouth fell right open like this. Okay, so he's a mouth breather. And he probably didn't even know it. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. And what I said to him was, you want to do MSE for aesthetics, and you think that you don't have breathing problems, but you're a mouth breather, and do you realize how unattractive being a mouth breather actually is? You see, you don't notice that your mouth is going slack and falling open when you're not paying attention, but other people are. People are watching you when you are sort of zoned out, when you're texting, all right? When you're sitting across from someone at dinner, reading a menu, okay, and your mouth falls open, when you're doing anything, right? When you're doing anything that absorbs your mind, causing you to take attention off of your mewing, your mouth falls open. That is the definition of a habitual mouth breather, and it is very unattractive. We've all heard the adage of don't be the dirty mouth breather. Being a mouth breather is essentially it's a way of calling someone a doofus, right? So correcting mouth breathing, okay, and becoming a nose breather is critical, not just for health, as I'm about to get into, but it's also critical for aesthetics. Don't underestimate how unattractive it is to be a dirty mouth breather. And that's why improving facial structure through something like MSE is going to improve not only your health directly through the ability to breathe better, but it will improve your aesthetics indirectly, not just in terms of giving you a bigger, more Hollywood smile, not just in terms of maybe expanding your mid-face, your cheekbones, but it's going to help you become a nose breather, which is inherently more attractive. Now, pertaining to another aesthetic aspect of mouth breathing versus nose breathing, in this chapter, okay, James Nestor documents the work of Eylharvald in the 80s in San Francisco, who worked with monkeys. And what he did is that he had a sample of monkeys. I don't know how many. Okay, let's say 20. Half of them, he stuffed their noses and prevented them from breathing through their nose, forcing them to become mouth breathers. 10 of them had stuffed noses. The other half, he allowed them to breathe normally, which would be nose breathing for these monkeys. And what he found was that over the 2 years that this experiment went on, okay, and yes, I know it's cruel. It's cruel that he did this to these monkeys, that he forced them to become mouth breathers. Over that 2 years, what happened was the monkeys who were forced mouth breathers had downsized growth pattern of their face. Okay, they had longer, thinner faces. Their faces actually changed in response to the mouth breathing. They had narrow dental arches, high vaulted palates. Again, they changed to develop this deficient maxilla. They had crooked teeth. Again, their maxilla shrunk, the teeth crowded. And they had gaping mouths, which means their mouths fell open. They became dirty, ugly mouth breathers. Okay? So, again, you want to do MSE for increasing your cheekbones and for aesthetics, yada, yada. But remember, the key to improving your aesthetics through something like MSE is going to be, in addition to all that stuff, in addition to the direct bone augmentation, is going to be you becoming a nose breather and the downstream effects of that. Long-term ability to mew better and to provide the stimuli to your own skull that's going to allow you to develop a better facial structure over the long term. And I'm not talking about, pressing your tongue up on the roof of your mouth and magically expanding your bone over the course of 6 months. No, I'm not saying that. I'm talking about over the course of years. By becoming a nose breather, you're inputting the stimuli that's going to lead to a long-term better development of your skull, I think even in adulthood. I'm talking maybe 5 to 10 years of nose breathing to see a real marked result in improvement of your facial structure. Okay, and then regarding just the deleterious health effects of mouth breathing, I just want to list a few things from chapter 2 of James Nestor's book. So, the work of John Douillard. He took cyclists, professional cyclists, and he told them to get on this bike equipment and to cycle with just their mouth breathing, just breathing through their mouths. And then he had them run the same experiment, just breathing through their noses. And what he found was that mouth breathers would breathe 47 breaths per minute at max resistance of the bike machine. Nose breathers only breathed 14 breaths per minute, and their heart rate was actually unchanged even at the highest level of resistance. And what he concluded was that nose breathing cuts total exertion in half and offers huge gains in endurance. And if any of you have seen my video on barefoot running, I actually read the work of Dr. John Douillard back in 2011. A kid I went to college with was all about Douillard and his work on nose breathing. And so I was familiar with Douillard now for almost 9 years. And I've been a big fan of running within your breath. That's the phrasing that Dr. John Douillard uses. You want to run within your breath. And the way you do that is by nose breathing. When you nose breathe, it forces you to limit your exertion and allows you to run to your ability while keeping your heart rate manageable and breathing in such a way while you run that you feel exhilarated and you feel alive and vital rather than feeling exhausted and weak and sort of strung out from over exerting yourself. So that's John Douillard. And then Nestor's own experiment where he plugged his nose for so many days, right, forcing himself to become a mouth breather. What he found was that his snoring increased 4,820%. And he got to the point where he was having 25 apnea events per night. So mouth breathing causes sleep-disordered breathing, which is terrible for your health. Okay? Mouth breathing causes the body to lose 40% more water because when you exhale through your mouth, you're losing moisture. And I remember Dr. Timothy Bromage, who is actually sort of the PhD behind the AGA, you could say. He's the Enloe prodigy behind the AGA. So again, this is a case where take what you want and leave the rest. I don't buy the AGA stuff, but he did have an interesting thing to say where he said, it is so essential to nose breathe while you run because of this issue around humidity and moisture loss. Imagine being in the savannah of Africa and chasing down prey on a 25-mile hunt, right? Because humans are known as being endurance runners who chase down their prey to the point of the prey becoming exhausted. And then they would kill it and eat it. And that is essentially our sort of evolutionary advantage and how we survived and became a thriving species was through our ability to long distance run. Well, he said, imagine mouth breathing that whole time in the savannah of Africa and losing all of that water through your mouth. You'd never survive. You have to nose breathe as an endurance runner. So that's an interesting factoid about water loss and mouth breathing. And it's just some facts around sleep-disordered breathing leads to bedwetting, ADHD, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, chronic insomnia, mood disorders, blood pressure derangements, learning disabilities. So not fun. You don't want to be a mouth breather. You don't want to develop sleep-disordered breathing. And finally, a Japanese study around mouth breathing that found that when you force mice to mouth breathe, those mice develop fewer brain cells than mice who are breathing normally through their noses. And the mouth-breathing mice with the fewer brain cells take twice as long to get through a maze. So mouth breathing makes you dumber, too. In summary, we don't want to be mouth breathers. We want to be nasal breathers. And that is something for all of us to consider, whether we're interested in health, aesthetics, or both. That's it for now. Catch you all soon. Peace.